Here I serve as special assistant to Mayor Gainey, and boy, I really appreciate everyone being here today to celebrate the amazing George Vashon. Can you imagine? It's the 200th anniversary of his birth, and he led a very significant life in a very compact time and in difficult times for African Americans in particular. So I'm going to try not to do a lot of talking. I am going to introduce some of our speakers. And our very first speaker is Mr. Paul Thornell. Mr. Thornell is the great-great-grandson of George Vashon and a partner at Melman Consulting in Washington, D.C. He came all the way here. If you can give him a round of applause.
Thanks very much for welcoming me here. It's really a special moment for the family of George B. Vashon and a wonderful opportunity to reflect on his life. July 25th of this year marked the 200th anniversary of his birth, and I'm thrilled to celebrate the legacy of his life's work. My family's so grateful to Mayor Gainey, Pamela Collier, and his team, and the city of Pittsburgh for creating this opportunity to help shine a light on his time here as a pioneer and the Vashon family's close ties to this community. I was first introduced to George B. Vashon when I was about 10 years old, more than 100 years after he died. My grandmother, his granddaughter, Frances Vashon Atkinson, told me stories of him and his achievements that led to my interest in finding out more. Like many other Americans, I was inspired to ask questions about where I came from, in part by watching Alex Haley's Roots in the late 1970s and being fascinated by his uncovering of the story of his family in America. George B. Vashon's life was committed to advancing the rights of Black Americans through education, the law, and the abolitionist crusade. He lived from 1824 to 1878, was raised in Pittsburgh after being born in Carlisle, and spent most of his life here, Syracuse, New York, and Washington, D.C. Often overshadowed in notoriety by some of his peers, Vashon's career and achievements were extraordinary for a Black man in 19th century America. My grandmother shared with me his extraordinary academic abilities at an early age, attending school with other Pittsburgh Black youth, excelling in math, literature, and foreign languages in ways that would have been extraordinary for any well-schooled adult at the time. His early years exposed him to the abolitionist crusade through the work of his father, John B. Vashon, a veteran of the War of 1812, a well-to-do businessman, leader of Pittsburgh's Black community, and close associate of the noted white abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. The two Vashons were conductors in the Underground Railroad in Pittsburgh in the 1830s and 40s, helping escaped slaves by hiding them in the elder Vashon's barbershop and bathhouse, then located on 3rd Street at the corner of Wood. George B. Vashon attended Oberlin College, which was the first school to allow admission to Blacks and women, and he became its first Black graduate in 1844, also giving the valedictory address. Vashon was one of the first Blacks to earn a college degree in the country. He returned home to Pittsburgh to pursue a legal career and advance his work in the abolitionist crusade and education. He studied law under Judge Walter Forward, a prominent figure in Pennsylvania politics who later became U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. After 2 years of instruction, Vashon applied for admission to the Allegheny County Bar, but was denied because of his race. A devastating blow to him, he chose to leave the area and pursue the career path and successfully passed the New York State Bar and became the first Black lawyer in New York. He moved to Syracuse, New York after teaching in Haiti for about 2.5 years, and then set up a legal practice in Syracuse to assist Blacks seeking freedom after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. There, he was also a regular contributor to Frederick Douglass's The North Star and taught as one of the country's first Black professors at New York Central College. He was a leader in many anti-slavery conventions of the time and was the first Black to run for public office in New York. Vashon returned to Pittsburgh in the years leading up to the Civil War, taught in the public school system here, and became president of Avery College, a higher education institution founded by Charles Avery, a noted Pittsburgh leader. Vashon met and married a fellow educator, Susan Paul Smith, and the family moved to Washington, D.C. in the 1860s. He was one of the leading figures that advocated for the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments after the Civil War. He served as an official with the Freedmen's Bureau, where he met General O.O. Howard, its head, who recruited him to help him found Howard University in 1867. There, he was its first Black professor and taught for 2 years, also helping start the law school. He left Washington, D.C. and went down to teach at Alcorn State University in Mississippi, where he died in a yellow fever epidemic in 1878. He's buried in an unmarked grave somewhere on that campus. I've done extensive research on my family history and published The Absent Ones and Providers, a biography of the Vashons in the Journal of Negro History, and I'm grateful for any opportunity such as this one to share our family stories. In researching the life of George B. Vashon and sharing what I was told and later uncovered, I'm regularly confronted with some version of the question, why isn't he more well known? While he shows up in some history books and snapshots of his career have been documented, his name is not as recognized as some of his contemporaries, yet he contributed as much, if not more, and certainly collected an array of firsts throughout his 54 years. I've grappled with this very question, why, and realized that there is no convenient answer. One possibility, though, is offered to us by Alex Haley, as he writes in concluding his family's story in Roots that, for the most part, quote, histories have been written by the winners. My family is so appreciative of this moment and the leadership of Mayor Gainey, Pamela Collar, and his team who made it happen. As we commemorate the 200th anniversary of George B. Vashon's birth, I'm hopeful that the people of Pittsburgh recognize his legacy and profound contributions to the nation. And that is what we are here to celebrate, and I'm so grateful you all are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I didn't get a chance to share this, but Paul is the most gently persuasive and persistent person that I've met in a long time. And I really appreciate that. So I learned a lot. I'm amazed at the things that your ancestor did. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we have Dr. Jules Smith. Dr. Smith is the Assistant Dean of Sciences at Allegheny Community College, CCAC instead of being fancy. And she's also, as of this summer, the Executive Director of CCAC Homewood Campus. Would you please thank her?
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here before you to speak on such a great legacy. On behalf of CCAC, you know, having this honor is amazing. We heard Mr. Thornell talk about his great-great-grandfather and the amazing accomplishments that he made, knowing that a person of color had been the first Black lawyer in New York, the first Black graduate of Oberlin College, knowing that he has accomplished so many things that many of us only dream of, regardless of our race, is powerful. The testimony in his life alone is significant. And he was an advocate for African Americans in education and getting our education in higher ed. And knowing that him serving in the offices of being the president of Avery, being a professor at Alcorn State, which are both historically Black colleges and universities, and knowing that he, through poetic voice, through things such as Vincent Ogue, which was his poem, spoke on the plight of African Americans being oppressed. And so we at CCAC, especially at the Homewood Brushton Center, advocate significantly for the removal of barriers, all kinds of barriers. They could be socioeconomic, they could be mental health, they could be food insecurities, whatever it is, we try to remove those barriers for our students. It has been my goal since being in this position since August to make sure that our students' needs are met, every single student, whether they come from high income to low income, regardless of race, regardless of gender and ethnicity. And so it is our goal to make sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to get an education in marginalized communities. And so we are just thankful for your ancestors and the path that they paved, thankful for you to be here as well, standing in his legacy. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I noticed as we were putting this program together that we were very heavy on lawyers, but I needed to get a spoken word poet here and an educator. Dr. Smith is an amazingly brilliant educator here in Pittsburgh. So Mr. Vashon had so many talents that it's hard to put them all into one category. So thank you for that, Dr. Smith. Next, we have my colleague, Jesse Exelis, who's excellent, and he's the Deputy Solicitor of the City of Pittsburgh. I also found out what I didn't know. In addition to that, he's a leader within the Allegheny County Bar Association and was awarded a Outstanding Young Lawyer Award. So congratulations on that. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for joining us during this momentous occasion. So when I think of George Vashon, I see two traits that we shared. So the first, he and I shared being immersed in Haitian culture and society. So George Vashon, obviously, he went to Haiti to teach languages such as English, Greek, and Latin. For myself, and I'm gonna quote my mom on this, I had the distinct pleasure of being born into a Haitian family. So for that, I think we share the same trait because we've seen Haiti probably in the same, even though in different time periods, in the same lens of you see a group of people who have been pushed hard, but they still continue to make great strides in keeping themselves up and trying to continue to push for freedom. So the second trait that I saw between myself and George Vashon was that he persevered through a lot of trials and tribulations. As you've heard, he tried to take the bar in Pennsylvania and was denied that, and then he ultimately took the bar in New York, and he decided in New York he was ended up being the first Black lawyer in New York, licensed Black lawyer in New York. And I took that to heart because I think for a lot of attorneys of color, a lot of professionals of color, we hit a lot of barriers and ceilings, but sometimes really means you just have to persevere and continue to push forward. And I think, you know, looking through his history, you've seen that he's persevered to ensure that he got what he thought he should be. And I think that's also a kind of a sign for all of us professionals to continue to push forward. And on top of that, looking forward, my hope is that going through his footsteps, I can widen the path that he's already created for folks who look like myself and who look like yourselves as well, to ensure that we continue to help build for not only just like our local community, but our bigger community, but just being there and being a big help to push not just the legal community, but also pushing to make sure that we have more of a pathway forward and we can continue to break future barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Next up, we have Miss Regina Wilson Esquire, a history maker herself. She is the 116th president of the Allegheny County Bar Association. She's the 12th woman out of all those years, and she's just the third African-American woman to hold that position. So please welcome Ms. Wilson.
Thank you to Mayor Gainey and the City of Pittsburgh for having this event to honor George Boyer Vashon. As we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the birth of George B. Vashon, I want to recognize his lasting impact on the legal community of Allegheny County. While he was denied admission into the Allegheny County Bar in 1847 and 1868, Mr. Vashon's willingness to fight for his admission laid the groundwork for those that followed in his footsteps. In the opinion published on March 30th, 1868, in the Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette, the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas stressed that segregation was best for everyone. The opinion was written by Judge Stowe with notes from Judge Mellon. It quoted, "I see nothing but evil likely to result in both races from their being kept and encouraged to remain promiscuously inhabiting the same territory. I would do nothing whatever to promote it." 23 years later, in 1891, J. Welford Holmes Sr. and William Randolph became the first Black lawyers admitted to the Allegheny County Bar. 19 years later, in 1909, Robert Vann, known for his work as the editor of the Pittsburgh Courier, was admitted to the bar. It should be noted that he was the first Black person to graduate from what is now the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. At the time of his admittance, he was one of 5 Black lawyers in Allegheny County. 41 years later, in 1950, the Honorable Homer S. Brown became the first Black judge on the Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County. He served from 1950 to 1975. Judge Brown was admitted to the bar in 1923. He, along with 6 other lawyers, were the first Black members to be allowed to join the Allegheny County Bar Association in 1943. 40 years after the installation of Judge Brown in 1990, the Honorable Cynthia Baldwin and the Honorable Shirl Allen became the first Black women to serve as judges on the Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County. 28 years later, the Honorable Kim Berkeley Clark became the first Black president judge of the 5th Judicial District, also known as the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. The Allegheny County Bar Association was founded in 1870. I'm the 116th president of the ACBA and the 4th Black person to serve as president. Our mission statement is to empower our members, promote a just, accessible, and inclusive judicial system, and serve the community at large. Contrary to the words written over 150 years ago, we recognize that championing equality, diversity, and inclusion in the legal community is an important part of our mission. I had the honor of attending the ceremony in 2010, admitting Mr. Vashon into the Pennsylvania Bar. The room that day was filled with a diverse crowd gathered to celebrate Mr. Vashon. While Mr. Vashon was not permitted to practice law in Allegheny County during his lifetime, his work and his efforts blazed the trail for all of those that followed in his footsteps, including me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And then we are going to have Mr. Joseph West Esquire. He's a partner and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer with Dwayne Morris. And his predecessor was also someone very special to the Vashon family. So I'll let him mention that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gainey and the city and your entire team. I just want to tell you how honored we are to be here and how honored I am to be here to represent Dwayne Morris. As Ms. Collier mentioned, there is a direct through line from the excellence, the extraordinary story, a lot of which you heard, some of you for the first time today, of George Boyer Vashon and our firm. Dwayne Morris is a global firm. We have over 900 lawyers and 30 offices around the world. Some of my colleagues from the Pittsburgh office are here today. And the most important office for us today is the Pittsburgh office. I am a partner at the firm. I'm the firm's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. My predecessor in that role was Nolan Atkinson. Nolan is the great-grandson of George Boyer Vashon. Nolan also was the first Chief Diversity Officer for any large firm in the country. It was Nolan's efforts in 2010 that encouraged our firm to petition the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that led to the ceremony where George Boyer Vashon was posthumously granted his license to practice law. And in that year, the ceremony led to the beginning of the George Boyer Vashon Lecture Series. It started that year. It continues throughout every year, and our firm is proud to host that series. Prior to joining Dwayne Morris, I was in-house counsel at Walmart, and I left that role to become the CEO of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. My first year at MCCA, Nolan Atkinson invited me to be the lecturer for the Vashon series. Immediately after that series, I created the award at MCCA that goes to the law firm that focuses in the most meaningful way on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to this day, MCCA's highest award is called the Vashon Award. And so you see Pittsburgh's native son, the footsteps that he led, that he created, the legacy continues throughout this profession. I just want to end by mentioning something that really struck me. Dr. Jewell, you mentioned the purposes of and the value of identifying and eliminating barriers to inclusion. I think sometimes in this day and age, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a bad word. And I have to push back on that, because when all of us have the opportunity to succeed, all of us can and will succeed. I encourage all of you, when you have an opportunity, to look up a study that was produced and published in September 2020 by Citigroup called The Cost of Racism. The Cost of Racism. That study showed that in the first 20 years of this century, from 2000 to 2020, the US lost 16 trillion in GDP because of bias impacting African Americans in just 4 areas of our economy: wage and income disparities, lack of access to educational opportunities, housing discrimination, and lack of equitable access to entrepreneurial capital. 16 trillion in GDP lost because of those biases. The year the study was produced, the entire GDP for the US was $19 trillion. That tells me, Dr. Jewell, that if we had eliminated those biases, would African Americans have benefited? Of course. You know who else would have benefited? Everybody. Everybody. A $16 trillion GDP boost would have benefited the entire country, if not the world. And so as we celebrate George Boyer Vashon, and we are reminded of the opportunities that were denied him, think about the fact that those opportunities were denied all of us. And let's embrace our duty, our obligation to identify barriers, to eliminate them, and ensure that everyone benefits from the excellence that we all can bring to bear. Thank you.
Thank you for those encouraging words, Mr. West. And before I bring the Honorable Mayor up, I just want to remark, when I was growing up, it used to be before you dated someone, they'd say, who are their people? Who's their people? Because your lineage tells a story, right, of who you are. And when I look at this man and hear about his uncle, that gene from the Vashon family continues to wind its way through that lineage and that family. And again, I just want to thank you for presenting this opportunity to us in the city of Pittsburgh. So thank you. Thank you again. So it is always my great pleasure to bring up the Honorable Mayor Ed Gainey. He is the 61st mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. He's a history maker himself because he is the first African-American mayor in the city of Pittsburgh, and he's just an amazing person. So if you could welcome Mayor Gainey.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I have a proclamations, and we know the proclamations can get long, so I'm gonna read a little bit, and I just want to go into something that I want to say about today and why I think this day is so special. You know, whereas George Vashon was a remarkable figure in the history of Pittsburgh and the broader United States, known for his pioneering contributions as an educator, poet, lawyer, abolitionist, and activist. And whereas born in 1824, Vashon's exceptional dedication to education was evident when he became the first African-American to graduate from Oberlin College, a milestone he achieved as that college valedictorian. And whereas George returned to Pittsburgh and studied under the leadership of Judge Walter Forward, after 2 years, he applied for admissions to the Allegheny County Bar Association. His application was denied because of the color of his skin. People of the African descent were not U.S. citizens. He was rejected in 1847 and again in 1868. He was admitted to the PA Bar in 2010. And whereas despite this roadblock, Vashon insisted in becoming the first African-American to be admitted to the New York State Bar. He left Pennsylvania to go to New York to be admitted. That's a statement all by itself. I say these things because sometimes we don't respect our history. And sometimes in not respecting our history, we don't give credit to where credit is deserved. I need you to understand that if things would have been equal all along, if we would have had the opportunity to prosper like everybody else all along, if we had the opportunity to education all along, if we had the opportunity to have careers all along, if we had the opportunity to be accepted as Americans all along, if we would have had these opportunities from the beginning, we would need diversity, inclusion, and equity in anything that we do, because we would have provided pathways in America for everybody to have an opportunity to excel and thrive in a way where they can live up to what they want to be as American citizens in the United States of America. Many were denied that. Many don't know the exceptionalism in their family, or where they get that gene that Pam talked about. That gene that allows them to believe they can be whatever they want to be. Today is a great day as I look around at so many professionals that will expound upon where they come from and be able to exceptionalize their career in the way that the next generation that comes after them will have the opportunity to believe that they can be something that most people that come from our community never believed they can become. He did that. He did that. So for me to just read this proclamation is great. But for me to talk about the roadblocks that he broke down for you to be here today, for you to be here today, for you to be here, for one of the men of excellence that just got his recognition last year, for his great-great-grandson to be here, is why I believe in making a pathway for everybody. And why I believe in the civil rights movements that said, don't judge me based on what my race looks like, but the content of my character. Why it gives me the opportunity to stand here as the first African-American mayor in the city of Pittsburgh. See, we need each other. In order to grow and have the society that we want to have, we got to look back at the history makers that went through the pain, that trailblazed the way, that felt rejection, that had to deal with adversity at a time where he wasn't even considered a U.S. citizen. We come a long way as a country. And so I don't look at what happened to Mr. Vashon as something that is a negative. And people will say, well, why don't you see it as a negative? Because if that was the order for me to grow, that I had to feel that pain that my ancestors went through for me to stand here today, I say thank you to him because I appreciate what he sacrificed for us to be able to stand here today. So I don't take it all as a negative because it's my history. It's a history that I wish that everybody knew. Because the more we knew about each other, the deeper we would be in culture, the more ignorance we could get rid of. And the more ignorance that we could get rid of, the better people we would be as a nation. American, the land of the immigrants, the land where everybody comes to be free. We have to ensure that every single day that we get up, that we remove roadblocks and barriers and focus on access to opportunity so that everybody has a right to thrive. Thank you, Mr. Vashon, for opening up opportunities that others couldn't see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gainey. And that concludes our program. For those that traveled from Maryland and DC, welcome back to Pittsburgh for some of you. Welcome to Pittsburgh for others. For our folks that have traveled from Homewood and other places, get back home safely. And we have some refreshments if you want to take some time to talk and take pictures. Mr. Mayor, before you leave, somebody wants to take a picture. Please feel free to do that. And thank you so much for this day. I